Tucked way back in the woods, I saw it. What some would think was just an ordinary animal, a deer, as I'd always certainly thought of them. This one was different. It exhibited all white, a genetic mutation caused from a potentially lack of genetic diversity. While it's natural for fawns to exhibit white spots, an all-white deer is a genetic mutation, and it's not all that common. In fact, many hunters seek them because of their scarcity and rarity, but it's also a pretty good sign at a lack of genetic diversity, because animals like that are white and not a natural color like brown are far more vulnerable than an animal that would blend well into its environment. So it's truly saying a lot to see something like a white deer, and it's easy to understand why this is happening to my native species of deer. I do want to point out that being a white animal does not necessarily mean you have some sort of genetic problem. If you'll look at this beautiful painting here, you'll see that there's two white birds. And in fact, to the untrained eye, it may look like the same type of bird. There's actually two species of birds here. I believe this to be the white pelican, and this is probably either the snowy egret or the gray egret. But both these birds are naturally white, so it's not uncommon for animals to be white, but it is uncommon for deer to be white. If you look at this map, you'll see as we zoom out, this area is surrounded majority of cropland with small bits of forested areas. It's in these areas that these deer are able to survive and reproduce. But what happens when you don't have connections or corridors? They're not able to crossbreed with each other, and that actually creates a genetic bottleneck, and that's how recessive traits like albinism, and is actually what causes these deers to be amelanistic. So that is actually the deer's population sending off signals saying that, hey, we've got a problem here. Today we're going to talk about a plan to help reindeer, bear, and even crabs, and how a genetic study reveals a scary truth behind these manatees. The biggest factor I probably missed while talking about the little corridor of land of the Akimbo State Forest. Go ahead and hit that like button, help support wildlife conservation. Otherwise, hit it because you don't want to support it. How wildlife crossings can help reindeer, bears, and even crabs. Every April, Sweden's main highway comes to a periodic standstill. Hundreds of reindeers, overseen by indigenous Sami herders, shuffle across the asphalt on E4, which is a highway, as they begin their journey west to the mountains and winter gorging on the lichen near the city of Umeå. Talking about how a corridor can help prevent catastrophic and potentially fatal for both reindeer and humans on the highway. It creates an alternative path for them. But this isn't the only animal that is potentially affected by highways. They're talking about here, and actually have a good example of them building bridges to help with the Christmas crabs, I think they're called. Red crabs on Christmas Island. Red crabs on Christmas Island climb a bridge designed for their protection, which is really a pretty impressive display of just how many crabs are actually crossing these highways, and that just a few policies that they can implement and conservation efforts can really help save these animals. So that's a good story on how they can do that. And there's a few wildlife corridors here. I think in the Ocala National Forest in Central Florida, there's one because they have black bears, and unfortunately the Ocala National Forest is divided by a few highways, I-75 being the most notable one. Low genetic diversity in 2 manatee species off of South America. So that's incredible, because when I think of South America, I think of pristine and dense rainforest, and they're saying there's low genetic diversity in 2 manatee species off of South America, which is sad to think that a place that's so wild and abundant could have a problem like this. It just shows how we have to do everything in our power to make sure we're doing what we can to help wildlife. Worldwide marine megafauna are at risk of extinction due to climate change, habitat loss, pollution, overhunting, population fragmentation, and hybridization with related species in the disturbed areas by humans. Genetic studies can help determine the conservation status of marine animals, identifying threats, species conservation, and informing interventions and policies such as protections of diversity hotspots or corridors for the gene flow. So saying basically that probably what I would suspect happened is similar to what's happened to a lot of the rivers here in Florida, is they've created dams, levees, dikes, and other obstacles that these manatees cannot traverse back and forth from, and what causes genetic bottlenecks and the inability for these specimens to travel and commingle, which is what really limits the spread of their genetic diversity. This is also how new species are created. Now, lastly, I'd like to go over one factor that I probably missed out on and certainly don't want to overlook, is that when they purchased the tract of land at Akimbo State Forest to connect the wildlife corridor, by completing that tract of land, that allowed the species to migrate from track A to track B. The genetic diversity is pretty much the topic of this video. Is important to be able to commingle. So thank you very much for pointing that out, and it's truly important. I made a little shorter video today. Y'all get y'all's work week started, and I appreciate all of y'all. We'll keep doing what we do, and make sure you hit the like button down below, because that helps support conservation and funds and promotes this channel. So thank you very much. Y'all have a good rest of your day, and peace.